here we are again in my home instead of being in the church. And I know for several people this is disappointing. They really want to be in the church. And listen, myself and the leadership want to be in the church. But right now, people in our community and in our church are being directly affected by the coronavirus. And they've decided at this moment that it's not worth having people come into the church building and spread the virus, that we can do our services online. So I'm just asking that you pray with us and that you bear with us during this time. Today I want to start a new sermon series, and we're going to be going over the Sermon on the Mount. But first I want to start talking about worldview. And what is somebody's worldview? I looked it up on the great theologian Google. Says it's a particular philosophy of life or a concept of the world. Now, why is somebody's worldview or their philosophy of the world important to talk about and to think about? Listen, our worldview is what shapes what we see in the world. It shapes what we view about the world, our philosophies, anything that we're thinking about. And many times our worldview is shaped by different things. It could be shaped by your family, by your religion, clearly, or by the circumstances that you live in. But it also could be shaped by things that have happened to you, maybe not so good of things that have happened to you. Or it could be shaped by the place where you live. See, when we read the Bible, a lot of times when people read the Bible, they begin to paint the Bible in their own worldview. You know, that they read the Bible with this philosophy that they already have about the world, and then they paint that view onto the Bible. They impose their philosophy onto the philosophy that's being taught in the Bible. And listen, I want to challenge us to be people that understand that, yes, we have a worldview, but that we are not letting our worldview shape what we view about the Bible, but that we are letting the Bible shape what we view about the world. You know, oftentimes when ministers and people get up and they start preaching, sometimes you can hear their worldview come out over what is the Bible teaching. And we all the time let our worldview shape what the Bible is saying. If you don't believe that, go look up the most popular verses. If you look up one that says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, and that is plastered everywhere in Christian society. As a matter of fact, in society in general. And we take that as that we can do anything, but that's not what Paul was meaning when he wrote that. Go back and read the whole section. Try to take out your worldview on it. Or one of another popular ones is, judge not lest ye be judged. You've heard that all the time. I challenge you to Google where that's at and go read it, because it's Jesus talking. And right after he says all of that, we're going to go over here in a little bit. In a few days, few weeks, he then says, "Don't give your pearls to pigs, or they're gonna trample them." You know, we take this and we plant our own worldview on what the Bible says. You see, even here in America, we do that. Literally, we paint an American worldview on what Jesus was saying in the Bible or teaching us in the Bible. We literally color the Bible, the USA, and we base biblical teaching on America only. Or listen, worst of all, I've heard it. I've seen churches do it. We equate the American story of how Americans and our founders and all of this to the Bible and biblical principles. See, I don't want us to be people that are letting our worldview shift what we are reading and believing about the Bible. I don't want us to be people that are even taking the place that we live here in America and letting that shift the view that we have on the Bible. Instead, I want us to understand when we are reading the Bible that we are reading it for it to shape our worldview, for it to change how we're viewing the world. And that's why I wanted to start this series on the Sermon on the Mount. And you can find it, we're going to be in it for several weeks. You can find it in Matthew chapter 5 and through chapter 7. And see, we call this the Sermon on the Mount. And it's kind of deceiving because a lot of people, they hear Sermon on the Mount and they think, here goes Jesus to the synagogue and he's going to stand up in the pulpit and he's going to preach this formally written sermon that he designed. And that's not at all what it is. Instead, after healing their sick and performing miracles, Jesus goes up on a mountain and he sits down. His disciples get in close and the people get in closer. And he begins to teach what it is going to be like to follow him. What it's going to be like for God's kingdom to enter the world. Listen at this collision point that is happening. Here comes Jesus, the Son of God, into the world. Listen, where heaven and earth are being brought together and where they're starting to overlap. And Jesus is saying, if you want to be in that, not just in that earthly kingdom, but in that godly kingdom too, here's what it is going to look like. Listen, it's an upside down kingdom. It's not a kingdom where there's going to be privileged members. It's going to be a kingdom for poor people, for the wealthy, for the religious, for the non-religious. So let's go ahead. Let's start. I'm going to start in Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. It says, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Well, I'm going to pause right there real quick. I know a lot of people are like, man, you're going to pause and you only read 2 verses. But there's so much that I want you to catch right there, just right there, those 2 verses. If you look at the overarching theme of the book of Matthew, Matthew is trying to connect Jesus to a new Moses. So when he says he went up on the mountainside and he went to sit to teach, it's a clear connection to Moses. Listen to the story of Moses and Jesus. Both of them, their births were foretold in a dream. Listen, they both, as infants, had to escape being killed by the rulers, and both of them wound up in Egypt, or were in Egypt. They both eventually end up returning to their people and to their land. Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, and Moses wanders in the wilderness for 40 years. At the end of his wilderness test, Jesus passes through the Jordan River, and the place that Moses didn't get to go in the promised land. So over and over, Matthew is showing that there's a clear connection between Jesus and Moses. That Jesus isn't just an ordinary teacher. He's not an ordinary person. And how many times in the Bible did Moses go up on the mountain? And when he went up on the mountain, what did he do? He went up there to receive instructions from God to then relay to his people. So Jesus going up on this mountain to teach is a clear reference to Moses going up on the mountain to receive instruction from God. Here Jesus is going up on the mountain to bring this new teaching. Moses went up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments and brought them back down, which is what the Torah and the Old Testament, the law is all based on. And then Jesus goes up on this mountain to bring in a new teaching for people to live by. This new teaching of an upside down kingdom where there are no privileged members, where everybody is welcome. But things are upside down. They look different than what you think they should look. When we look at this moment, we have to question, what is our role? We see that going into this, that Jesus sits down and he begins to teach. So he takes on the role of the teacher. And then I think, well, what is our role when we look at this situation? Is it our role just to read it and to roll on and to not apply it to our lives? Or is it our role to sit down and to become the students that are listening with the disciples and listening with the people and going to be amazed at the things that are getting ready to be said? And I hate when people start with the end of the story, but I think if we want to understand our role in this story, we need to start with the end of it. So I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 29. It says, "Therefore, Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rocks. The rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. When the rain came down and the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. You see, we have to take the posture in this moment as a student, where we are the students that are sitting at the feet of the Word of the Lord. See, our response is that we have to follow and obey this new teaching, this new commandment that's coming down. And we'll see in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is teaching us a new way of thinking, a new philosophy, a new way of dealing with offenders by forgiving them, a new way of dealing with violence, he said, by suffering, a new way to deal with our money by sharing and giving, a new way of dealing with problems of leadership, and it was by drawing on people's spiritual gifts, a new way of dealing with a corrupt society and building a new order, a new relationship between men and women, between parents and children, between slaves or servants and masters. Listen, this is a radically new vision for what it means to be human, for what it means to be living in the process of this world. And we can't take that lightly. It's a radically new worldview that we as Christians have to be adopting. And we begin with the end. It gave us the fundamentals, the clues that we're going to be reading in the Sermon on the Mount. It's a good teaching, a good pattern for our lives, a solid rock that we can build our lives on and not a shifting sand. Augustine describes the Sermon on the Mount as the perfect standard of a Christian life. You see, I want us to begin to look at this Sermon on the Mount, to look at this section of the Bible, Matthew 5 through 7. Go ahead and read it several times as we go through this. And I want to begin to shape our world, to shape our worldview, that we are viewing the world as an upside-down kingdom, not where we're focused on ourselves, on our country, or on anything other than being focused on Jesus and loving others. And by the end of this section, you're going to have a challenge. By the end of this Sermon on the Mount, and your challenge is going to be, am I going to follow Jesus? Am I going to follow this radically new design plan that he has? Am I going to let it shape my worldview? Or am I going to let everything else in the world shape my worldview? Am I going to let our current situation in our society, or am I going to let my family or the circumstances or the situation I'm in shape my worldview? Or am I going to let this radical new teacher who's coming in to bring a new message from God shape my worldview?